Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debi Silber, and today's guest is Beatty Carmichael. Beatty is the author of The Prayer of Freedom, a science-based prayer method that helps people break free from what doctors often can't: chronic pain, anxiety, addiction, emotional trauma, even bipolar disorder. He teaches his method at one of the largest addiction recovery centers in the U.S., where nearly 9 out of 10 women who complete his class walk away free. No more pain, no more medication, no more addiction urges, and the surprising part, many experience complete breakthroughs in just a few days. So when betrayal trauma lingers, it doesn't just show up emotionally, it often takes root in the body. Chronic pain, anxiety, addiction. We try everything from talk therapy to supplements, but nothing seems to work long term, or many things at least. What if it's because the real root is spiritual? In today's episode, I'm joined by Beatty Carmichael, author of The Prayer of Freedom, who shares how unhealed spiritual wounds may be the hidden cause behind persistent emotional and physical struggles. You'll even hear me experience real-time relief from neck pain I've carried for years. If it can help me, I'm trusting it can help you too. Here we go. Okay, everybody, I am here with Beatty Carmichael today. And as it relates to betrayal, we can try all different kinds of things. We can try tools and modalities and all the things. But sometimes we can just go to prayer as well. And I have someone who's going to help us with that and so much more. Welcome, Beatty.
Well, hello. Thank you, Dr. Debbie. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Let's just before we dive into prayer, what it does, how it can serve, and all of that. Can you give us a little bit of a backstory? What led you to doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was actually born into a family of 7 generations of medical doctors, so like almost 200 years worth. Instead of going into medicine, I ended up going into business for 25 years. And then God pulled me back into healing, but a little bit unique twist with this. What's happened is I started to see a lot of people that were stuck in all kinds of issues, dealing a lot with just childhood trauma and things of that sort and betrayals. And it really took their life down into a spiral. And medical science and psychological science really didn't have a good solution for it. So I started looking at things from the spiritual side instead of the medical side. And I started to uncover some things that were remarkable. I started to see things disappear that doctors say could not disappear. And it has about a 90% success rate. So I ended up writing a book called The Prayer of Freedom that outlines it. And that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah. So first of all, let's go back to when you have all these generations of doctors and you don't want to be one.
Yes.
What was that conversation like?
Actually, Dad encouraged us not to go in it because for the generations past, the medical profession was very much of a altruistic method of helping others. And in his generation, you had a lot of malpractice insurance start to hit the tort stuff. You had managed care, PPOs. Everything became corporate. Everything became driven by the dollar rather than by patient care, and it just totally changed the landscape. And he saw it coming. He hated it. He exited early. His dad retired at 85 from medicine. My dad retired 15 years earlier at 70, and he was happy to get out. So he told us, "Don't go into medicine." So it was it was with great blessings that we didn't make it there.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I remember decades ago when I started in health, and there was something about it just struck me one day. Like when it's so profound that you remember where you were. Like I was actually walking in high school in the hallway, and it just hit me. I'm like, why wouldn't you want to prevent something rather than heal it? So I must have had a conversation with somebody, and it really started this whole preventative
Yeah.
idea instead of just taking care of something when it's there or medicating and suppressing a symptom or an issue. And it's interesting that here your dad had that same kind of awareness
Yeah.
that how the model works a lot earlier.
Yeah, it's my heart is to help people get free. And this, generally speaking, the medical community, the whole healing community, from pharmaceutical all the way down, has really turned to a profit motive. And And there's so much regulation that you have to run it that way. You can no longer, when my dad came along and my father-in-law was a doctor, he would sit you down at the desk and talk to you and try to and understand you as a person. Now you're just on an assembly line, and it's just totally different.
Yeah, and this is why functional medicine is really taking off, more holistic modalities as
Yes.
well, because they're taking into account the whole person. And I just want to make sure we make it clear. I'm not against Western medicine. Like if your leg is falling off, you need to put that leg back on.
Yeah.
So there's definitely certainly a place, but it's just there are other things to consider as well. And what I find so interesting is that we only consider these things when the other models haven't worked for us. But of course, that's because that's what our insurance covers as well.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting too. So I'm not down on medicine. Was talking with one person. He said, "You're not going to tell people not to go to the doctor." I said, "No, absolutely not." What I do and what I see a lot of things is the medical community really fits key areas, especially like acute issues and other things. But when you have long-term things that just linger and linger and linger, and all they can do is medicate you, then you're not getting a solution. You're just getting dumbed down on that.
Yeah.
And that's really what I started to see. And that's kind of where, my work has been is helping people get free of those things that have just been chronic. And doctors have said, hey, you're just going to live with anxiety and depression the rest of your life. Just get used to it. Here's the medication. We'll just try to keep you from being too womped out, just to handle this stuff. And I'm saying, like, I remember talking to a psychotherapist. She was with Psychology Today. And I was sharing that, I've seen anxiety, depression leave in 12 minutes. She said, that's impossible. I don't want you, I don't want anything about you because that's impossible. But she's looking at it only from one side. But from the spiritual side, it leaves instantly. And so
Well,
these chronic things can go.
right. And it's so interesting because, well, first of all, if you don't believe that anything can change, well, of course, what's that? What it was that saying, if you believe you're right. Oh, I always botch up quotes, but you know what
I
I'm talking
know.
about. If you
Yeah.
believe you're right or wrong, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you believe. You're going to be right either way because that's
That's
based
it.
on your belief.
That's
Exactly.
it. So let's take on a few of these issues, like something like chronic pain or addiction
Okay.
or anxiety. Here's where I mean, think of the millions, if not billions, are spent on anti-anxiety medications and managing and just suppressing these symptoms so people can get through their day thinking and really hearing this is what you do. You just take this medication, and then kind of manage it that way. The part about it that never really resonated with me was where are the skills and tools we're learning when, so that we don't need to be on a medication for life.
Yeah.
That just never served. So let's talk about that. So here somebody has some sort of chronic pain or
Yeah.
anxiety or yeah.
Let me share a perfect story because
Sure.
so one of the ladies I worked with, her name is Ashley. She was raped by her dad and her uncle at 5 and 6 years old.
Oh,
So you're talking about betrayal
yeah.
and trauma. That was her life. Started spiraling downward. It wasn't until 14 she was clinically diagnosed as anxiety, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, but she had it for years. She was, at the time I started working with her, she's in her late 20s. She's on 400 milligrams a day of Serafel to just calm her nerves. She's on I think it's Buspirone and Zoloft. So all these medications, and that was her life. In addition to that, her 1 year old and 3 year old daughters were both heavy asthmatic. They were already diagnosed and using medicine, the inhalers and stuff, because their asthma was so bad. And that was her life, and there was no change. Doctors can't figure anything out. All they can do is try to calm it by chemicals. So I guided her through this process on the prayer of freedom. And she said it's a structured approach to a specific type of prayer to handle these spiritual roots. She said, I woke up the next day and I was totally normal. I went to the psychiatrist. She said, if you don't need the meds, don't take them. And she's now, that was like 6 months ago. Well, let's see, no, that was 8 months ago. She hadn't been on her meds since. And the amazing thing, because of so many things happening in the spiritual realm that we don't understand, is her two daughters who were diagnosed with asthma and on medication. When Ashley, the mom, went through this, their asthma instantly healed, and they haven't taken a single asthma medication since. So there's just a lot of things that happen quickly if you just handle the root. And if you miss the root, then you're going to be stuck with it for a while.
Yeah, this reminds me of a million years ago when I was a personal trainer and I was working with a woman who had breast cancer and she was bouncing back from it. And her son, she had three kids, and her son, I think they called it hysterical paralysis, where
Right?
she was diagnosed and couldn't really get around and she was really having a hard time. He stopped moving and they had to carry him everywhere. And then she eventually got much stronger. I'm making a very long story short, but she signed up for a 5K race that I did with her.
Yeah.
And sure enough, she crosses the finish line. And who runs to her? Her son.
Wow.
Oh yeah. It was beautiful. So it's amazing what the mind can do. And it just reminded me of it when you said about the kids. So this also reminds me of that Hawaiian prayer, Ho'opono, whatever. There's that beautiful Hawaiian prayer that there was a doctor who was in charge of all of these cases. Nothing was working, and with this simple Hawaiian prayer, started to see lots of changes. So let's talk about what are some things that people do try, and why don't they work, and then we'll get into what
Yeah.
can do.
A lot of times most people go first to the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and medicines usually don't work. If it's something more psychological, mental type of thing, they'll go to a psychotherapy a lot of times. And they'll go back, and a lot of times that can clear a lot of things up, especially if it's just a past trauma and learning to deal with it. But there's sometimes that it doesn't really clear it up, like my friend Ashley and lots of others like her. She's been to all the psychotherapists for years, and it just hasn't, there's been nothing that they could do to help her fix that problem. Something still wasn't released. And other people then try holistic stuff, like, you're talking about chronic pain. I've been on some shows where the host had all the initials after their name of various holistic PhDs that they have. And they're still dealing with things like chronic pain here or pain there or an issue here. And I just lead them through this thing literally on the show, and it disappears.
Mm.
Because I find that, we talk about the power of our mind, and our mind is actually in the spiritual realm. Our brain is in our cranium, but the mind, our mind, will, emotions, personality, is in a different realm. And that realm has a lot of power into the physical realm that we just don't understand. So it's not so much simply changing what you believe. This is the thing I think about prayer. Prayer is not a religious process, not this type of prayer that I'm talking about with the prayer of freedom. It's neither religious, nor is it faith-based, nor is it how you think or what you believe. It's simply accessing the spiritual laws that drive things, and therefore you can, just like with that Hawaiian prayer thing, as they started to go through that Hawaiian prayer, there was physical changes because it's tapping into the spiritual laws that most of us don't understand, but they really have a lot of power.
And let's talk about those spiritual laws. What are
Yeah.
they?
So at a very high level, to give the backdrop of how this works, um, there's a God or a creator or some higher power out there that created us. And he placed in us a conscience. And the conscience is where he writes his standards of right and wrong. So if I do something wrong and my conscience is pure, then I'm going to feel convicted. And no one has to tell me that I did it wrong. I just know there was something wrong about that. It's kind of a moral compass. And it shows the evidence in the existence of some higher power that built us for a certain way and in a certain procedure. When we violate that, it opens up a door to us in a spiritual component that allows issues in our lives to start happening that are uncomfortable. The best way to describe it is when my daughter was early age, she'd be all fussy. I say, okay, if you don't calm down, I'm putting you in timeout. She didn't calm down. She goes to timeout. And then she comes back and said, Daddy, I'm sorry. I was wrong. So I put my arms around her, say, Oh, I love you, honey. And it's time to get out of timeout. In other words, the torment, quote unquote, of timeout was because she broke my standard. And once until she came to the realization that she broke it, then that torment existed, that timeout. It seems almost like that's how these spiritual laws work. There's what I'm finding is, and here's a perfect example. Let's say that you really you blow up at someone, at maybe your spouse, and you start to notice that now you're getting angry all the time with at least little things that didn't bother you. Now you're just immediately you just blow up.
Mhm.
What that is it's a spiritual. A lot of people call it an energy source
Mhm.
or vibration or something like that. But it's an energy source of anger that what it does, it actually amplifies your desire to get angry or your reaction to be angry all the time. And you can't control it. When you have addiction, it's the same thing. When you have anxiety, it's the same thing. When you have fear, panic attacks, depression, all it is something in the spiritual side that's amplifying that urge to where it's you can't overcome it. And then if you simply turn it off, it all goes away. So
Mhm.
that's the spiritual laws I'm talking about. It's a when you do something here, something happens over here in the physical realm.
Mhm.
And have you ever heard, I'm sure you probably heard of karma before, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay. So it's a part of the Hindu religion, but they observe the same thing. If you do bad things happen to you. If you do good things happen. How does that work? Something in the spiritual realm is driving it. And that's what I started to uncover here.
So then, okay, and I think most of us have heard of karma and consequence and
Yep.
cause and effect, right? Is we do something, there's going to be an effect from that, from whatever it is that that choice was. But what? Tell us what's happening though, kind of on that spiritual realm. So here we have, let's say, let's take addiction.
Okay.
We have some, let's say there's an addiction, and now someone's realizing, okay, you know what, I'm done. There usually it's we crash, and that's when we crack wide open, and we're willing. And then what happens then if we're willing? Tell us what happens.
Yeah, if you're willing. So addiction is one of these energy sources. I use the word spirit um, because there's some reason, but I call it a spirit of addiction. And when you have addiction, for anyone who's had it, you go, I just can't stop. It's like I got to take another hit, and I don't want to, but I do it anyway. Now we feel like a hypocrite. We feel like we're betraying ourselves and betraying our family, and it shuns them. And they say, Dad, until you can stop it, we're not getting back together. I'm not going to bring my kids around your house because you're such a hypocrite. And so now I'm just falling down. What happens is somewhere in my life, I open the door for the spirit of addiction or this energy source of addiction to inflame and amplify addiction in my life. And I literally cannot stop. Going through the 12 steps won't stop it. Anything that you do on the physical side to try to stop it won't because it's a spiritual issue, spiritual root. So what I do, like with the addicts that I work with, is I guide them through. In my book, I've identified 18 different categories of where we open these spiritual roots. There's like three of those categories that tie into addictions. One of them is betrayal and
Mhm.
abandonment, um, and there's two others. But I simply guide them through that worksheet that's in the book to identify these things that happen in their lives, and now they can address it.
Mhm.
Just like psychotherapy, just like, you go back to the trauma and you address it. And once you address it, then you get released from it. And that's kind of the same process, except the way that we address it with the prayer of freedom is simply through a prayer process that, in very simple terms, just like my daughter, God, I'm sorry, I confess I did wrong. And
Mhm.
then God says, okay, that's all it takes. Now let's remove that spirit of addiction. And I've seen people with addiction that have been addicted for 20 years, meth, amphetamines, all kinds of stuff,
Mhm.
that instantly, almost like overnight, they no longer have any desire for drugs because they get the spiritual root out.
And it all it makes sense. I'm always trying to get into the hearts and the minds of our listeners and viewers, and they're thinking, okay, you mean to tell me that I could be a full blown addict, I could be a meth addict, I could be, I could be addicted to alcohol, whatever, anything else, and you're saying within minutes we can get to the root of that, and it could be gone.
Within 24 hours, yeah. So, like, if you were to, not trying to promote the site, but I have a lot of information. But if you were to go to my website, theprayerfreedombook.com, just slide to the bottom, I have a lot of on-camera testimonials. You'll see a lot of them that are addicts, a lot that were high anxiety and depression, that were in broken marriages, suicidal, and all of them share the same story, and that is it was almost instantaneous by the next day. And I know that in testimonies it's easy to curate just the ones that actually work. But as I tested this, so when I wrote the book, The Prayer of Freedom, I was volunteer teaching at a women's addiction recovery center, one of the largest ones in North America. I was doing 3 classes, and so I wanted to statistically measure how effective is this approach in their lives. So I had all the students, my 3 classes, make a list of every issue they were dealing with at that moment. So all their addictions, whether it's sex or pornography or drugs or alcohol, all of their mental issues, all of their chronic physical issues, any sicknesses, and then things of that sort, and rate them on an intensity of 0 to 10. And I don't know, Debbie, if you know people who are addicts, but usually someone with an addict has a whole string of other issues in their life.
Mhm.
So it makes for a great testing environment. And then I gave them the worksheet that's in the back of the prayer book and say, do this on your own. And then I gave them the prayer process that they would do with that worksheet. And I checked back with them 30 days later and had them regrade their list on the intensity level. 87% of those women who went through this process, everything on their list had basically gone to zero, totally disappeared. And in fact, can I just share it? Because I know that this is one of those things that people say, it sounds too good to be true, but could I just read a short thank you note from one of these students?
Well, sure, but what I would like you to do is walk us through this.
Sure, sure. So the way I'll walk you through the simplistic version, but sort of like making a cake, you mix eggs and milk and some other ingredients together, mix it all together, stick it in the oven, it turns out as a cake. But if you don't follow the recipe, it won't. So I'll give you the basic process, but
Mhm.
the recipe is a little bit more structured. The basic process for any of this, and normally, sometimes I do this with the host, but I don't know if you have any issues. Like, let me just pitch just in case. Do you have anything that you can measure that you want to get rid of? Anxiety, depression, pain, glaucoma, or anything like that going on,
Pain,
right? You have pain. Okay.
absolutely pain. I've neck pain.
Okay. Tell me about it. How long have you had it?
I've had it for years. I've tried
Okay.
everything, everything.
So
That's why I sort of move around like Frankenstein.
I love it. Okay. So 9 out of 10 times when I do this on the show, it instantly leaves. So I'm going to demonstrate with you if you're willing to go through the process.
So willing because I want all of my viewers and listeners to hear this so they can say, wow, if it worked, it worked. I'm all in.
Okay, great. So now intensity level 0 to 10, 10 being worse. Give me a number.
Right now, 5.
Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do is this 3-step process. Now, this is not religious, but prayer is to a higher being. So I'm going to just use the word God,
Mhm.
okay? We're going to ask God to reveal to you anything that neck pain may be tied to. Something, I'm going to use the word a standard that you broke. The Bible term would call it a sin. That just means that you did something that God doesn't want you to do, but it's breaking his standard, or anyone that you need to forgive, okay? And then the step number 2 is I'm going to give you the specific words to nullify and remove that spiritual root. Step number 3, we're going to ask God to remove it. So that's how this is going to work. Now, for my disclaimer for the show, this is oftentimes only temporary because this is just for demonstration purposes, but the full process in the book makes it permanent. So just repeat after me. Dear God,
Dear God,
I want to get rid of this neck pain.
I want to get rid of this neck pain.
And if it has a spiritual root,
And if it has a spiritual root,
bring to my mind
bring to my mind
any sin I've done that I need to confess,
any sin I've done that I need to confess,
or any person I need to forgive.
or any person I need to forgive.
All right, great. Now we're going to move to step two. And for this, I'm going to have you mute your mic so you're not airing dirty laundry. Okay. So you can be truly honest. And so the way this works now is we're going to use two patterns. If it's something you did that you need to, what I'll call repent or confess that you were wrong, the word pattern is, I repent of blank. I repent of stealing money. If it involved anyone else, I repent of stealing money from John. Okay, put their name in it. If it's someone to forgive, it doesn't matter if you feel like you can forgive or even that you ought to forgive or not. Doesn't matter your emotion. It's just the statement. I forgive blank for blank. Okay. I repent of blank. I forgive blank. So go ahead, just speak it out real quick and then come back online when you're finished. Yeah, you cover your mouth so no one can read lips.
I'm back.
Oh, wow. Okay, perfect. All right. And did that include any person?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So now we're going to do part 2C. And it goes like this. We're going to break the spiritual bonds, the negative spiritual bonds with that person. And I break all negative spiritual bonds
And I break all negative spiritual bonds
with that person
with that person
and release all judgments against that person.
and release all judgments against that person.
Okay? Now we're moved to step 3. We're going to ask God to remove it, and then we're going to command it to leave. And now, God,
God,
I ask that you remove my neck pain.
I ask that you remove my neck pain.
Take it from a 5 to a 0.
Take it from a 5 to a 0.
And now,
And now,
in the authority of God,
in the authority of God,
I speak to the neck pain,
I speak to the neck pain,
and I command you to leave right now.
and I command you to leave right now.
All pain, get out.
All pain, get out.
All right, now check it out and tell me if there's a difference in pain. It was a 5.
It was a 5. Um, I could give it like a 2.
Perfect. Okay, so now watch what happened. You've been dealing with this for years, and now in a matter of, I think it's been 2 minutes, it's now gone from a 5 to a 2, and all you did was confessed of something that was wrong, in this case, forgiving someone. So now we're going to do step number 3, probably one more time. It goes like this. God, thank you for removing my pain down to a 2.
God, thank you for removing my pain down to a 2.
I ask that you remove it to a 0.
I ask you to remove it to a 0.
And now in the authority of God,
And now, in the authority of God,
I speak to my neck pain,
I speak to my neck pain,
and I command you to go all the way out.
and I command you to go all the way out.
Go to a 0.
Go to a 0.
Now check it out.
It's hard to, I can't really tell.
Is it still a 2, or can you not tell if there's any pain?
I can't, like, I want to say it's gone, but like it's
But
still,
you can't believe it's gone.
yeah, like I still feel a little,
Yeah,
but I mean, it definitely, I'd say it feels better. Things are cracking and making all kinds of noise. So,
that's good.
where's to say, yeah.
So watch this. Unforgiveness is the number one issue I deal with. In almost all the shows, it's an unforgiveness, and their pain leaves.
Mm.
So you have someone who's, and that trauma, watch this, because it was unforgiveness, it means that someone betrayed you at some point, more than likely.
Well, hello.
Yeah, really? Okay.
All my
And
listeners and viewers are we're all yeah, we're right there with you right there.
okay. And now, even though you've gone through your process,
Mhm.
all you did is something slightly different, and that pain you've been dealing with for years instantly left.
Yeah.
That's
So yeah,
how this
I
works.
just want to sum this up for everybody because our group is struggling so terribly with deep, deep, deep emotional pain
Yeah.
that manifests physically. And I know my body seems so sensitive to anything, if it's a mental, emotional, the next thing I know, I am feeling it in my body. And I'm sure our listeners are the same. So can we sum up, just recap what that process was so they can just say, okay, I could totally do that. Of course, the extended version is in your book. We'll get to
Yeah.
that, but I want them to have just this real thing. So if they were driving and they couldn't do it or whatever, I want them to say, okay, when I get back to my house, I am doing this
Yeah,
prayer.
absolutely. So the simple version, ask God if there's a source, a spiritual root, and to bring it to your mind. Number two, you forgive that person or you repent of it. Number three, you then command it out. But I want to caution people. Uh, it likely will come back. More than half the times it comes back because there's another spiritual root that occurs if you're not careful.
Mm.
Okay, and and if you have that one issue, it's likely there are other issues in your life that maybe you don't even recognize because it's not like a physical pain, but it's just like like one guy, his hands were just always shaking. And
Mm.
I said, why do you do that? So I don't know. He just done it for years. So in just a few minutes, his hands stopped shaking. And they've never shaken since. Because there are a lot of things we live with that we think it's just normal the way I am right now. But a lot of times there's these little spiritual roots. So I would really encourage, I'm not trying to promote the book, but I'm trying to promote how to get free. And that is with the prayer of freedom. There's 18 categories. There's very structured prayer because there are different roots that take different type of responses. And there's a process here. And that's what I've been developing for years and systematizing it. So if there are people that really want to do this, you can try the simplified demonstration approach. But really, if you get the full book, you'll see like, oh my gosh, it just gets rid of everything else.
And how can someone know if there is a spiritual root?
Anytime there's something persistent, like your pain has been persistent.
Hmm.
So if you got anything persistent, so that's persistent relationship breakups, you relate conflict after conflict after conflict. Anything like addiction is persistent, chronic pain persistent. If you have a sickness that's persistent, if you have anxiety or depression, anything persistent,
Okay.
that's almost always key that there's a spiritual root to it.
Oh, that's great to know. Okay. Beatty, what do you want everyone to know as we wrap up?
The most important thing to know is you don't have to live in pain. You don't have to live in anxiety and depression. You don't have to live in these things that detract from your life because life can be abundant. It was designed to be that way. But what happens is we open doors to these things, and unbeknownst to us, we're creating our own problem. So the biggest thing for people to take away is there is a solution. You saw just how fast it worked. If Debbie knew that all it took was to forgive that person, command the thing out, years back, she wouldn't have had any pain, but she's been dealing with it. And this is how we all do. So don't be stoic and don't be macho. Get rid of it. And
Yeah,
there's a solution.
that's great because I'm sure there are so many people walking around with all kinds of pain, physical,
Yes.
mental, and emotional. And how great is it that there's a way to set us free? Biddy, I just want to thank you so much for your time, for your insight. Give us the name of the book one more time.
Yeah, so the name of the book is The Prayer of Freedom, but don't try to go to Amazon or Google and type in The Prayer of Freedom because you'll get so many returns. Go to, add a word book at the end of the title, theprayerfreedombook.com. I have information there. You can get some discounts. Also, there's a link directly to the book where you can buy it
Oh,
at Amazon, but it takes you straight there. So go there first,
perfect.
theprayerfreedombook.com.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. I know so many people are feeling a whole lot better because of what you shared. So, what if your emotional pain, your chronic stress, or that lingering injury has a deeper root than anyone ever explored? Stay in touch with Beatty by going to theprayerfreedombook.com, and we'll have all of his information in the show notes at thepbtinstitute.com/podcast. Here's my biggest takeaway: even if something may sound unconventional, who cares? Let the results speak for themselves. So if you're struggling with any type of persistent pain, physical, mental, and emotional, give the 3-step process a try. And if you're a coach or healer looking to help clients move through betrayal trauma at the root level, join us at thepbtinstitute.com for certification or join us for our most popular Reclaim program. Can't wait to be with you next time. And here's to your breakthrough.